listeners. It's your host, Tao, and we're back here for another episode of Plant Planet Plate. I'm here once again with Muneezay, and this is a part two segment to our episode on fieldwork. So, are we going to call this 2.5 or episode 3? What do you think, Muneezay?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think 2.5 because it's still very much in the space of field work, but it's more about the ripple effects of field work and sort of that space in between when you're not quite in the results mode, but you're doing your looking at your data, doing the analysis, and sort of actually seeing, do we need to go back in the field? Is there something that we missed? So I would say it's 2.5.
Okay, so 2.5 it is. Yeah. So the last episode, we really spoke about what we did in the nitty and gritty. We talked about what counts as field work. And now all I can say is like, wow, what an exhausting time. Just even reflecting upon that, just how many days we were in sun, how many days we were like waking up early and cycling to the agri-tech center. But at the end of that particular segment of time, which was from about mid-June to July. What do you remember doing? I remember us sitting at a table with Surin with our laptops open and our notebooks, also open.
Yeah, I do remember that day very clearly, and it felt like the end because in the sense that we had done the interviews, we I remember also a lot of papers because we had these Excel lists that we would print out. It was much easier to fill out names and I also almost found myself thinking, can I recognize Khmer writing now? Because you'd sort of see the same names come up because the list would start with the same 10 plants or so. So yeah, so I was thinking that, ooh, can I recognize Khmer lettering? I was not good at it at all. But yeah, I think what we were really doing was going through the names of plants, having them in Khmer, doing the phonetics. I think there was some time spent like understanding the phonetic sounds to say them as we speak, to write them as we speak them, and and then eventually sort of looking at how these plants are eaten, how they're prepared, and also realizing the role of mushrooms. So many fungi that were mentioned in our interviews.
Yeah, when we were sitting at that table, very overheated, very tired, because I think it was about 3 p.m. or so, like right after lunch, where you have that lull from your blood sugar being spiked and then going down again. I was thinking we have a lot of data. We have a lot more data than I anticipated. I'm not sure about how you felt. Did you think we'd find more, find less in terms of plant names and fungi?
I'm yeah, so not so familiar with this kind of research, whereas you had done it previously. So I think you had a little bit of a gauge, whereas I was just thinking, wow, this is a lot of plants that I have been around, having worked in Oddar Meanchey for 10 years, and I had no clue about some of them. And so I yeah, didn't feel overwhelmed, felt very sort of lucky that we were given these names and be able to document them. Felt overwhelmed looking at the next column, which was empty, which was scientific names. Really just wanted to get cracking to fill that in because I felt like that was a very important role in terms of speaking the language of conservation work and botany and biology, like where you have like the traditional names and then you match them to the scientific names, and it just sort of gives a sense of legitimacy to both efforts, and it allows my people and the forests and the monk forests that we work with to have the access to that information, that this is the scientific plant and this is its availability, and you can sort of say like, wow, is this plant about to be endangered? Because there's so much of it here near the agri-tech center. So for me, those kind of little moments of realization were just really, really great and special. And I guess I didn't really feel like, oh my God, it's so many plants. But what I did feel was that, oh my God, it's a lot of data that I just want to kind of dive into. And I prefer having that enthusiastic approach.
Yeah, I'm definitely the more of the like glasses half empty type of person when it comes to this. And I think it has to do with the fact that I felt like when we're doing field work, really digging, right? We're like digging a hole, like trying to explore, trying to learn things, and we have this giant like stack of gems or jewels, but we're not exactly sure where they all fit in and like how genuine they are. And I kept thinking, how many of these plant names are we getting are connected in the sense that they are the same plant with a different name? Because
That,
when I had done my PhD, I just had this experience where I thought, there are these two plants that are very popular, and it turns out that they were the same plant and that they just called them by different names despite living like 200 meters from each other. These two
yeah,
villages called it differently. And I said, oh, that's exciting from a linguistic diversity perspective. But when you're just trying to do a survey and you're just
yeah,
trying to figure out what's out there's bound to be these issues. And as I've been doing more research as we've been preparing the plant narrative essays, this is so common across
that,
different types
yeah.
of species of plants, like, for example, rattan, like
Mm,
600 different types of species. And because of the way that people have been doing surveys in different countries around Southeast Asia, like the same plant is being called different names. And it's just led to more, I don't know if it's like a red herring. I'm not exactly sure if that's the correct phrase, but it leads us down pathways of
yeah.
confusion.
I mean, for certain, this came up while we were doing our interviews as well. We had to verify, oh, do you mean like Chantolpnum? And then it's the same word, same plant, different name. Potwain, like it's that clover that people eat as a salad. But this reminds me of two things. Firstly, yes, that's true. We had to really be careful that we're not repeating names, and if it's a different type of the same plant. But then the other thing that I think of is what you mentioned at the RGS conference, the Royal Geographical Society conference we presented at. And you mentioned a key distinction between anthropologists like yourself and geographers like me. Do you remember that?
I think it has to do with like systems oriented kind of thinking.
No, it has to
So
do
with music, was it the
with
music comments?
no, it was when you said that anthropologists study the vibe and geographers study the sea.
Yeah,
So
that was it.
you were going deep into the research, and I was like, oh my God, there's so much. Let's find more because I was so interested in what else is happening spatially. And I guess you were thinking more about, wow, I'm going to dig deeper into this and find out more about what this plant is, or linguistically, how does it impact? So I guess in a way, us reflecting back on the fieldwork, you're just sort of seeing how our minds are trained in a certain field of work. And so yeah, so I guess at the end of July or mid-July, what we were left with was an Excel of 100 and I think 20 plus, 28 plus, which in since then I have added more to. So we are currently at 147 plants and mushrooms. 23 of them are identified to be fungi. There could be more, of course, but through our interviews, those are the names that we've pulled out. 44% of that database is already matched scientifically, which was not the case this time last year. And it's been a big journey. And maybe I thought it's something that I could talk about here a little bit in the sense that, once you sit with the data and you start to do the analysis, we have all those interviews that we got transcribed, shout out to the Royal University of Agriculture students that worked on that for us. But essentially, I sort of went into that dive mode of doing that methodical matching the names, Khmer names to the scientific names, really trying to figure out what plant is and finding some real gems at times and just sort of thinking like, oh, is this the plant that people keep talking about? Because I'd probably be familiar with it having grown up in Pakistan. So you have similar diversity of plants. But what I also realized was that one thing that missed in the fieldwork was this idea of photographs and having those as a verification point. Because at times we were doing interviews talking about the plants, but not necessarily having them in front of us. And so I had this idea to find photos of plants from like Kew Garden websites or very legitimate sort of sources and using them. And that method is called photo elicitation. And it has its critiques, but in that moment, I felt like it would be such a cool way of confirming back with the community if these are the plants that they are talking about, how would they eat them. And it also sort of I figured out that it became a very uh, good way to get conversations going. So I had the privilege through Green Shoots again this year to go back to Cambodia and do some of the agriculture, agri-tech work that I normally do. And I took out about 2, 3 days to do some of this photo elicitation work. I printed the photographs in Cambodia itself. And prior to that, we had also reached out to the Echo community, which is a online community of agriculturists based out of the US, but has a very prominent location in Thailand and quite well networked. So they also put it up online on their message board. But I got a few links to other plant identification apps through it that people said use those. But I thought, it's better to just go where the community is. And as I was going back, so I went and took the photos back and went and revisited some of the peoples that we did interviews with. And it was really insightful. I had lots of like little comments that people gave about, the photo is that plant, but it doesn't really look like that. So I'm not so sure. So you get to see critiques of like this kind of methodology. But generally, I think it went well, and it was nice to revisit people, because the other thing with fieldwork is you want to build that bond with the community. This is a slow research project. It's not an in and out rapid thing. It's we're building a relationship with the community. And as we're seeing, the initial set of data collection has opened different avenues for myself during this work, but for you as well, Tao. It has also allowed you to step on to other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, like the whole regenerative approach, not that like a regenerative approach to researching, because historically most research has been quite extractive, right? Especially with anthropologists. I'm not so sure about geographers. I don't know about your disciplinary history at all, but just being able to, call our team like friends and have meals together, or even just sort of like really invite students to come work with us on this project, and for them to dip their toes into really interdisciplinary work has been very rewarding for me. I think that what really is nice about the slow approach to research is having chances to kind of revisit and also adjust things
Yeah.
over time. And photos being really great, because even with photo elicitation, it kind of brought us to the mindset of like, okay, but what's also what's wrong with this methodology? And what were some of the critiques were like, these plants are like incredibly big, or the scale wasn't immediately apparent, or they don't look like that to our community
Yeah,
members that we interviewed, right?
because some of the photos are zoomed in for photo viewing. So I think one of them was definitely sort of saying like, oh, it looks like that plant, but it's probably grown with fertilizers because it's so big. And then the other thing was that same critique when it comes to voucher, when we were collecting vouchers, sometimes the flower is the edible part, but that's not showing. And how much can a leaf sort of indicate at times when you're looking at a photograph? And yeah, so it was these, it's taken out of the habitat that it's found in. It's photographed on a white background. So it's like it looks that like that, but I can't say for sure.
If I may add, that what it has inspired us to do is to kind of look at future field work, which we hope to do in the next year or so, to kind of have a more participatory involvement with photography. For example, the photo voice method. So we're
Mhm.
trying to get some cameras. So, like when we go on foraging walks and walk in the woods with our community members and our collaborators, like they can also take photos for how they think the plant should be represented in the data set, or at least our data set, right?
Yeah. And I did go through a moment of thinking that, oh, when I was doing the photo work, that, oh, did we miss this chance? Should we have done this earlier? And I guess that goes through anyone who has planned field work and is a little self-critical or looking at, what's the most efficient way to do this. And I do genuinely believe that we had to do those interviews the way we did them to then be able to draw out the plants that we would like to photograph. It just could not have been done in the same trip. And so yeah, so I do feel like the way that this fieldwork is sort of unraveling out in front of us as we're planning it step by step. And participatory research, definitely when it comes to sort of ethnobotany, the work that we are doing, and plant humanities is a great way, because what it also does is it helps the community to come together and be more in a decision-making space. At the end of the day, we, as in the context of Oddar Meanchey and being green shoots, we are close to a monk forest that does a lot of conservation work. The community has good ties. A lot of people that we interviewed were usually people that were together. So it has sort of, there's a lot of ownership right there. And we are just a facilitation meeting space. And so I'm really excited to do the participatory sort of approach. And it had to sort of come with the first initial data set that we collect, because now we have that wealth of information that is documented. And so it lets us to go to this next stage.
I think that what's really nice about this project is that it's grown to kind of have its own, so the word gravitas, I think. It
Mm,
has its own gravitas, like it has its own kind of mission and views and ways of growing, which, you know, it wasn't even possible without green shoots to begin with. But I think it's also create like a giant leaf of
yeah,
its own. And
yeah.
like I keep thinking about how because the work is very aligned and intertwined in many different ways, like some of the projects you do at Green Shoots also feeds into PPP and vice versa. Like I was thinking about World Food Day, which just happened
Yes.
month.
So yeah, we at Green Shoots currently we have almost 80 students that are enrolled. So 40 students are our agroecology kind of group. Well, there's 40 in Oddar Meanchey and 40 in Siem Reap, so it's total in 80. And that's a project we're doing with the Royal University of Agriculture. So these students are going through a 1 year agroecology program. And just to explain to people what agroecology is, although it is literally what it says. It's agricultural techniques with ecological mindset. So it's looking at things more holistically. It is the sort of farming we want to promote. And wild food plants and indigenous plants play a really strong role in it. It is one of the principles when it comes to farming with biodiversity. So that's really one way that we've tried to sort of give it more prominence. It's not just sort of, intercropping or biodiversity in the sense that flowers and plant and vegetables are planted together, but it's also understanding the role of uh, wild food plants. We both read that journal article. I'm forgetting the name of the author right now, unfortunately, but it's about the hidden harvest of wild food plants. And so that we've been able to incorporate it already a little bit. And Srepik, one of the researchers we've already mentioned, who helped us do a lot of interviews, joined us as the trainer for that. So I think I just looking at her feedback last night as I was typing the donor report, and she says that it's just great to revisit and sort of speak again with students this time about this project, and equally enthusiastic about wild food plants as we are. And she had just really good questions, like when you mentioned wild food, what exactly do you mean? And that's nice. It opens a conversation. So that's one way we've already started to apply this research in our day-to-day program. And then the other way is in the evening, we have 20 students that are enrolled in a US Embassy sponsored English language and learning program. But naturally, because we are in a working farm space, we try to incorporate as much of the farm and the surroundings of the Agri-Tech Center into this English language course. Actually, the slogan for the project is uh, Seeds of Knowledge, Gardens of Change. And so, yeah, so we try to incorporate food and sort of agriculture as much into that learning. So a lot of the students sat together and created these World Food Day posters. They are on the Green Shoots Instagram page. And they sat and like drew the different ingredients that go into samlo koko, which is, well, the literal translation is stirring soup, if I'm not wrong. But it
Yeah,
is
go means to stir, but
yeah.
I've also heard it translated as, I think by Chef Knack, as the village soup. And I also asked my mom about this because she also made selako a lot, and she said the only thing that defines selako is the fact that it's like every vegetable you have in
Yeah,
a pot.
yeah. The soup of 100 ingredients is another way that people have described it, ultimately sort of signifying that you use what you have. And it's one of the most popular dishes that came up while did our interviews. What do you use this green herb for? Oh, I added in some local, you know. So and actually one of the teachers on this program, Nat, who does a food blog on YouTube, the food blog, wrote to me and said, how do I translate these ingredients? And I said, they're Khmer ingredients. You can say local green leaves or something. It was slak bass, I think, which is the leaf
Sakba.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, the sweet potato leaf or some kind of potato. I'm not sure. And then moringa leaves, of course, go into it. So it's like the greens, which is very much like this is what I have available and this is what's going in the soup. But it's super nutritious. It's the ratatouille of Cambodia also is a description that has been given to it. And yeah, so the World Food Day posters was such a great exercise because it's again, it's all those things, pride in local ingredients, understanding sort of, the role that a soup like some local co plays in food security. And yeah, ideal for World Food Day because that's what World Food Day is about. And the students get a chance to learn Khmer and English names for ingredients and learn about the diversity of ingredients.
I think it's so funny that you said the ratatouille of Cambodia. It's just these like
It,
mental connections. Like, how do you describe something, yeah, that no one has
yeah,
ever tasted?
I know. And then I guess yeah, that's how people want to sort of explain it, even though it's nothing like ratatouille. And I think the other star ingredient of some cocoa is the toasted rice, right? They toast the rice and then they pound it
They
to
do,
add
yeah.
that, which gives it that very unique kind of taste.
Also
And yeah,
texture,
yeah.
texture as
And a
well.
friend of mine messaged me, and her mom made some cocoa and added Thuthao leaves, that's neem. And I was like, wow, that's bitter, but it's a taste, right? It's the taste of the preference, which kind of brings us back to when we were doing our initial fieldwork input, that the day that you mentioned in the coffee shop, and we were asking Sarin, so okay, so this plant, how do you eat it? What do you, and he was listing the different ways you can boil it, you can steam it. And then we were like, is that all? And he's like, yeah, as you want, because ultimately it is food. And to some extent, it is a little bit of we prepare and eat it as we would like.
Yeah, it's definitely a touch and go kind of taste-based world, Cambodian cuisine, especially when it involves local vegetables. People have very specific feelings on the age of different plants, so like young leaves or
Yeah,
young shoots or like older flowers and that sort of thing. Like
yeah.
even from a medicinal standpoint, I remember this is a plant that wasn't identified in our fieldwork, by the way, but like during my PhD fieldwork, there was one flower that could only be used as maternity medicine after the flower has fallen off the tree. You can't pick them. So this is kind of respect for the like life course of things and the timing of things that kind of unlock their potential.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And whereas in terms of foraging, I think there was a lot of like young leaves, they're tender, easier to eat, possibly, and the young stem, right? Like that's how they eat with rattan. It's like the new shoot. I'm forgetting the name right now, but I did draw a diagram in my field notes about the part. So
Yeah.
yeah, repair, yeah. And then so yeah. So it's like the thing that is just or kun, it's just coming out, and troyung, which is just like the new bud. And I guess it's tenderness as much as possibly taste. Yeah, easier to digest possibly, but a lot of yeah.
I guess we can say like what the fieldwork has done is that after we finish that stint, there's so
Mm,
many other different things that arose because of it. It's sort of like stirring up a garden and just waiting for it to grow.
it's the
And
some Rococo research stirring up.
oh my gosh, some Lakako research. Trautius Lakako.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, that's so funny. Yeah, and like this project gave me a starting point as like an ECR, as they say, early career researcher. I don't feel so early, I just feel kind of tired. And I think any other researcher
Still
will
early.
agree. It's like, what, how early is early? Is 10 years still early or something like that?
Yeah, because think of all of the other research that is yet to come, and that's simply because there is so much yet to discover in terms of learning, in terms of understanding. There's so much that I learned just being there for 6 weeks in a place that I felt like I knew really well. So, and learning new things. So still early.
Definitely earlier in our project. And what this project gave me was like a leaping pad to try to do that elsewhere because I think the plant humanities approach is global. And I was very fortunate to have studied that and really got into that with the plant humanities program at Dumbarton Oaks. And, trying to connect how Cambodia is related to Limburg, which is a southern province that I was living and working in at Maastricht University, and I was able to create a sister project to PPP, which was PPP Limburg. And we kind of asked similar questions. We had the multilingual approach. We had a foraging walk headed by my lovely colleague Roy Erkins and also Aidan Kelly teaching about how to kind of write the humanities of plants or think and write about the humanities of plants, but also digital humanities. And you think, wow, like 1 year is not enough time actually. And I learned by running the research team with you in Cambodia, like there's a lot of things that we kind of take for granted in our research space. We have a lot of power to kind of bend and change. But when you kind of move projects to other different locations, the expectations will obviously shift.
Yeah.
So I'd say that while the students working with me on PPP Limburg really enjoyed their time, I think infrastructurally there was just a lot of things holding us back, like finding green places near Maastricht because it's mostly like urban or farming area was more difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and also finding sources which were readable simply because everything was in dialect. Like it wasn't only in Dutch, it was in Limburgs, so dialect written archive documents, which
And
is a
yeah.
lot.
And did you also feel like doing it sort of in a slightly urban area made it that you weren't able to apply that sort of interview methodology, just sit and chat with people about the plants, or possibly harder considering we were in like the countryside in Cambodia where foraging is like daily practice almost, especially during the seasons. Would was that something that you tried to do at Limburg, and was that difficult?
Yeah, so recruiting people is definitely difficult simply because anyone who forages like knows each other. And then
Mm,
they hear like, oh yeah, one of person is being interviewed, maybe I shouldn't do it. And there's like a really big like issue with talking up. There's also people who like live in Belgium nearby, and the research assistants, had limited sort of access to them. Like the offering was we do the research interviews either online or
mm,
in person. It's more strict, and there was just some kind of difficulties with that. So it's more of like how people prioritize that in their life. Like for in Cambodia, I felt like foraging was just a part of the daily routine. But
yeah.
here it seemed to be kind of like a hobbyist kind of passion thing that people only cut out a specific amount of time for, even if it's discussing it for research.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
was kind of difficult,
Which,
I think.
yeah, which I guess, I mean, I'm just speculating, but if we try to do the same in Siem Reap or Phnom Penh, we might get the same sort of like, we know about these plants, we have foraged at some point, but it's not what we're doing on a daily basis. So yeah, so could have also that impact, like urban, rural, and interest based. But I do remember because I did meet you in Maastricht this year. There was a lot of more artwork that you managed to create with the students. Zines and sort of output in terms of plant material was different, which we haven't yet done. We've done a couple of that. We've done the poster now, but ours is yet to happen in that way. Whereas you managed to do more of that at Limburg.
Yeah, and I'm still sitting on all of that right now. And I think because when you have a lot of moving parts, namely students in different places and their schedules, they can give one bit, right? And you wanted me as an instructor, I keep thinking, what is this larger cohesive picture, right?
Mm,
This is going to be the final ending to the thing that we've been working on. And I think we might just have to separate it as piece by piece, as like interrelated objects as opposed to a zine. But it was really nice to just sit and cut and glue and color and lino cut print with people who really love plants, who really love learning more about culture and plants, and them coming from such different backgrounds. I think like we had a few people studying liberal arts, we had a few people studying social sciences, we had people studying science, like in botany and like biochemical stuff, global health, like all of this comes together and we just really learned so much about something we take for granted. We even
yeah.
saw many different like dandelions poking out through the cobblestone, and that's what we were discussing that day, dandelions.
Yeah, and I think that sort of kind of brings you to realize the beauty of plant humanities. It's I'm new to it. Actually, perhaps I would say I'm new to it in terms of defining it, but I feel like it's was something that I always had, in me. I love taking photos of plants. I love plants. I love working at in community gardens and things. So I was relating to plants in this way. I just never knew it had a name. And nobody told me when I was doing my dissertation. I guess it's such a well, not a recent discipline or interdiscipline, but yeah.
I think the ideas have been there. It's just we haven't had a cohesive term that kind of brought them all together.
Yeah.
And that's just the thing. The thing about creating something new or working with something considered new, novel, whatever people want to call it nowadays, it's just there's not enough support for it because people don't know
Mm,
what you're talking about. So I hope that one of the things that we take away, at least from all the field work, is the potential to start something new and let it grow and inspire other things, and that we continue kind of taking up more space and making more room for like reimagining our relationship to the planets and ecosystem and kind of invest in a joint uh you know progress, right? Joint protection, joint uplifting of everything around us.
yeah. And I think what it also sort of shows in terms of sort of planet plate and field work and this type of work is not limited to a place. The methodology is adaptable. It can go anywhere that people are interested in this sort of work. And there's other projects kind of out there as well doing similar things. A lot of people focus on cuisine, and we noticed that as well when we did our presentation at the Royal Geographical Society conference this year. People talked about the history of cuisine in certain place, and we talked about our plants.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything else you would like to add on
No, I
fieldwork
think
before we close?
no, yeah, no, I think I'm good and sort of starting to enter into that space that what happens next with the field work. So we'll leave that for the other episode. But thanks for like people sticking around.
Yeah, thank you so much.